We're going 60 deep. I'm hopefully going to cover every single guy you would consider starting this week. Now, first two tiers, don't really care about. We all know we are starting CMC, Tyreek, Lamb, AJ Brown, St. Brown, Eckler, Keenan, Etienne, Diggs. Obviously, you're starting all these players. The only thing that I can discuss is Keenan Allen did not practice on Wednesday. This will be something that we continue to monitor as we go through this weekend. If Keenan Allen plays, you play Keenan Allen. We are going to keep it super simple. Just make sure you subscribe to the channel. I'll give you updates with Keenan. Stephon Diggs will be at the bottom of tier 2 because it's a very tough matchup against the Jets. About the toughest matchup you could possibly ask for. But currently, you have a very high implied team total for the Buffalo Bills, hovering around 24 points. Vegas sportsbooks are telling us that this offense is going to be able to overcome this tough matchup, and you should look to start him regardless. Now, dropping down to our third tier, Justin Jefferson will lead us off at 9. Now, with Jefferson, we will need to continue to monitor to make sure that he is going to be good to go this weekend. But I'm operating under the assumption that he will play. This is a wide receiver that practiced all week last week. This is a wide receiver that has practiced all week this week. We had fantasy doctors saying that he should have been good to go last week, but he was just taking extra precautions, which makes sense. It's not like the Vikings here are a team with Super Bowl aspirations, even if I am rooting for Joshua Dobbs. Now, I'm not going to put Jefferson up in those top two tiers until we see him on the football field, though. Now, Cooper Kupp will be that next guy. I understand Kupp, very low 13.5 points per game, but it sounds like Matthew Stafford should be 100% good to go. You have an implied team total of about 22.5 points for this Rams offense. And right now, if you're looking at the underdog pick'em, you have Cooper Kupp at about 80-ish receiving yards. So, I mean, they are projecting him out there to be that locked and loaded wide receiver one we can feel confident with. Jahmyr Gibbs will be our next player at 11. And 100%, I understand this seems like a very aggressive ranking with Jahmyr Gibbs. But if we're looking at the implied team totals, right now the Detroit Lions are supposed to have the second best offense in the NFL this week. And if you combine this with the fact that Jahmyr Gibbs is not only a running back that you can safely pencil in for 5+ targets, but also a running back that now is showing us that he's going to get some involvement inside the red zone. This is a running back that I want in those full PPR leagues. We'll go Devontae Adams at 12. Adams averaging about 14 points per game. Obviously, very low mark, but you're going up against Miami. You should have to throw the ball throughout the entire second half. It looks like no Jimmy Garoppolo should be a good thing for him. Josh Jacobs will be our next guy at 13. With Jacobs, really haven't seen him involved as a receiver over the past 2 weeks, which is a little bit concerning, especially in a game against Miami where you're not winning this game, right? The spread is absolutely massive. This should be a blowout. Hopefully Jacobs is involved a little bit more as a receiver later on. Breece Hall will be our last player in this tier. With Breece Hall, pretty tough matchup. He is at 88.5 total yards for his underdog pick'em this week. Clearly getting involved as a receiver. I think you can be excited. And to be honest with you, if you're playing in a full BBR format, if you wanted to go Breece Hall over Josh Jacobs, not going to fault you at all. Now, we just got official news, ladies and gentlemen. We are already expecting it to be the case, but it's official. Devon Achane will be playing against this Raiders defense. Achane is averaging 25 points per game this season. That's more than CMC. That's more than Tyreek Hill. Now, it's off a very small sample where he has been the most efficient player, and this efficiency will come crashing down. So don't expect Achane to be that tier 1 option. I think that we can rank him as a must-start guy, though. If you're looking at Vegas sportsbooks, they are telling us that the Miami Dolphins should have the highest scoring offense in the NFL this week, and it's going to be a team that most likely looks to run the ball in the second half, given the spread in this game. David Montgomery will be the next guy. Similar story, right, with Montgomery. A team that's going to score a ton of points, a team that's going to be out to a large lead over the Bears where they will be running. Puka at 17, wide receiver that I'm fully confident in. If you look at his underdog pick'em, right now you have him at 65.5 receiving yards going up against Seattle. As we mentioned, you should have Matthew Stafford fully good to go. Now, if we are surprised and Stafford does not play this week, then obviously in that case, we would be moving Puka down. Raheem Mostert will be our next guy. We have Achane good to go. I'm going to be projecting out Devon Achane as the RB1 in this backfield, but nonetheless, this is a team that is going to score a zillion points. He's averaging 19 points per game so far this season. So even if Achane has a larger role, I still think that you have to start both running backs. DeAndre Swift will be our next guy. What's actually crazy is if you look at the implied team total for Philly, you're supposed to score like 21.5 points this week against a great Chiefs defense. Whereas with the Dolphins, they're supposed to score about 30. So it's just a night and day difference if you are looking at how these offenses should be scoring according to Vegas sportsbooks, which I will let you know again, they know more than you do. They know more than I do. And if you ever come across someone saying, oh my gosh, I know I can profitably bet the Denver Broncos -3 this weekend. I know so much more than DraftKings. I know so much more than these other guys. Run for the hills because they're probably lying to you. Now, going down to our last guy in this year, we will have Kenneth Walker averaging about 15 points per game. If you look at the over-under for this Rams game, actually pretty high scoring, at least what we're told. Now, keep in mind, even if Kenneth Walker's up there averaging 15 points per game, even if this is supposed to be a high-scoring contest overall, you do have to remember that Kenneth Walker really not getting involved at all as a receiver since you had Zach Charbonnet taking over that third down role. Currently, though, on Underdog Fantasy, you do have Kenneth Walker at 78.5 total yards. Interesting to see Zach Charbonnet at 45.5 as well. Maybe Charbonnet is someone you could look to include here, but very clear roles. You have the first and second down guy. You have the third down guy. And if you're looking at those pick'ems going, Mason, this is crazy. Clearly, Kenneth Walker's going to have more than 8.5 receiving yards. You can find that pick'em in the comment section in the description. Promo code FLOCK, 100% a positive match, plus our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers. And promo code FLOCK is also going to get hooked up with Amon-Ra St. Brown, more than less than half a total yard. So make sure you are taking advantage of that. Now, going down to our next tier will be led off with Jalen Waddle. Going back to these sports books, knowing everything, the Dolphins should be the highest scoring team in the NFL this week. I want every single guy we can get our hands on. Jalen Waddle is a young, proven talent, commanding volume and a great offense. That's what we want. Saquon Barkley will be our next guy here. You have an implied team total of about 13.5 points for this New York Giants offense. This is supposed to be the worst or one of the worst offenses in the NFL. Now, with that being said, Saquon Barkley's underdog pick'em is at 92.5 total yards. So they're still going out and they're still saying, while this may be the worst offense in the NFL, while this may not be a great spot, based off the raw amount of volume, you still have to start him, and he still has a high median projection overall. Now, full transparency, just because how much I am out on this offense, I personally would take fewer than 92.5 total yards with Saquon Barkley, but it's a good matchup against Washington. Now, Devonta Smith will be our next guy at 23. You're going to have no Dallas Goedert, obviously. No Dallas Goedert. We have seen Devonta Smith command about an extra target and a half per game in games where Goddard's missed over the past few seasons. So I'll be more excited about Smith currently. Garrett Wilson will be our next guy at 24. With Garrett Wilson going up against Buffalo, we know the story here. You're going to have a ton of targets. Garrett Wilson, pretty much a lock for double-digit targets every single week. I mean, let's go ahead and let's pull up what we have with his most recent games here, where you have Garrett Wilson 14, 13, 13, 12, 7, 14 targets. He's had 95 targets so far this season. So Garrett Wilson will be at the very top of the NFL in targets. They'll be trailing the second half. They'll be flooded with the ball, but the issue is obviously how bad the offense is. Derrick Henry will be our next guy. Applied team total of about 16.5 points. I mean, you want Derrick Henry in the games where Tennessee is going to win, where the games where Tennessee is going to be competitive. The issue is we just don't know if that's going to be the case going up against Jacksonville. Tony Pollard will be our next guy at 26. With Pollard, I did not draft this guy at all, but I still want to stand by. If I am seeing a player get about 15 carries per game, consistently draw targets out of this backfield, and it's a beautiful matchup going up against the Carolina Panthers, I am still going to rank him as a must-start guy. If you think, Mason, you're crazy, Tony Pollard can't be viewed as a must-start guy, they're saying Rico Dowdle's going to get the ball more. Instead of screaming at me that I'm that much of an idiot in the comment section, you can either do one of two things. Go to Underdog and go for lower than 91.5 total yards for Tony Pollard, or go to Underdog and say that Tony Pollard is not going to have a touchdown. That's what I'd advise you to do, ladies and gentlemen. I would not do that because I think that Tony Pollard is a great matchup against the Panthers, and he has consistent volume and a great offense. Now, on the other side of the ball, you have Adam Thielen. Really tough matchup going up against the Dallas Cowboys. This is not something that I am excited about, even though Thielen's been great. He's averaging almost 19 points per game. Just have an implied team total of about 15.5 points for the Panthers. Now, jumping down to our next tier, we're going to go with two guys in the same type of game environment. Yeah, Brandon Ayuk, Mike Evans. Both of them are actually a lot higher than this if you look at their points per game so far this season. My issue with Brandon Ayuk is you're looking at someone that now has the extra target competition with Deebo Samuel. My issue with Mike Evans is this is someone that now has a brutal matchup against the 49ers, where they're supposed to be the second worst offense in the NFL this week, only ahead of the Giants. So this week, I'm not too excited about Evans. I will say rest of season, Mike Evans will be much, much higher than this, though. Javonte Williams will be our next guy at 30, with Javonte, he's taking over. He's seeing the majority of the snaps. Jaleel is a complete afterthought. Samaje Perine maybe's in there in the 2-minute drill, but Javonte is that guy at this point. And against the Vikings, you could see the Broncos winning this game. Brian Robinson will be our next running back. Brian Robinson actually averaging about 14 points per game so far this season. You want to be excited about that, and it's a great matchup against the Giants, where, you could see this team look to run the ball consistently in the second half. We'll go Isaiah Pacheco at 32, with Pacheco averaging about 13 points per game. Obviously, great offense. Very tough matchup against Philly, where you have an applied team total of only 24 points for the Chiefs here, which will be much lower than what we're used to for this Chiefs offense. James Conner will be our next guy at 33. If you are looking at James Conner, going up against Houston should be a higher scoring game overall, and Conner is someone that I am very confident to play now that it looks like Kyler Murray is close to 100%. The only hesitation that we have with Kyler, of course, is this is a quarterback that, since he can run the ball, if the pocket collapses, he's not really going to have a super high check down rate, so maybe it does cap the receiving upside for James Conner just a bit. Rachaad White will be our next running back at 34. And to reiterate, Rachaad White will be much, much higher in our rest of season rankings. But you have a 14.5, 15-point implied team total for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here. So based off how bad this matchup is going up against the 49ers, with Vegas sportsbooks telling us that this will be the second worst offense in the NFL this week, I want to be very hesitant in how we rank these Tampa guys. If you're comparing some players in this tier, you have Rachaad White at 74.5 total yards for his underdog pick'em. Whereas, like we said, you had Tony Pollard at 91.5. So just to give you some baseline expectations with projections, we're going to go DK Metcalf, Deebo Samuel here, 35, 36. With Deebo only averaging about 12 points per game, but obviously a lot of these games he was banged up in, right? So I think you can be more excited in the long term for Deebo Samuel as he's fully healthy now. I think Deebo is someone we can be good to go with. Now, dropping down to our next tier, Aaron Jones is probably someone that's too low in these rankings, if I'm going to be honest with you. With Aaron Jones, I don't necessarily know how we should feel about this offense going forward. Right now, you have an applied team total of 20.5 points, which is decent, much better than like the Bucs this week. But he is looking capped at about 55, 60% of the snaps. It looks like you are for sure going to get A.J. Dillon in here each and every week. And if A.J. Dillon's going to get 40 to 45% of the snaps, Jones does look to have a cap ceiling somewhat. Now, Tank Dell will be our next wide receiver here at 38. I think he's taking over as the wide receiver one in Houston. Nico Collins has averaged more points per game so far this season, but if you actually look at the target volume, Tank Dell has been the number one target for C.J. Stroud this year. And you'll see this tier has a lot of Houston Texans in it. I think this is an offense that we have seen over the past few weeks that we want pieces of. DJ Moore will be our next wide receiver at 39. With DJ Moore, you'll have Justin Fields back in. 18.5 point implied team total. Don't love that, but ultimately, I think that DJ Moore is the same player that he's been all along. Probably still someone that you are looking to start, averaging 16.5 points per game. Singletary will be our next player at 40. With Devin Singletary, I am operating under the assumption that you have no Dameon Pierce. If Dameon Pierce were to play, then Devin Singletary will fall significantly lower than this. One potential issue with Singletary is he's not catching the ball. Really no target volume at all out of this backfield. I really do hope this changes. Devin Singletary is someone that I drafted in an embarrassing amount of underdog best ball leagues this offseason. Thank God we're actually kind of getting something right about this point. Even the hindsight being 2020, it did look like it was a really bad pick process-wise. We kind of get lucky here. Christian Kirk will be our next guy, 41, with Kirk. Wide receiver one for Jacksonville. Good matchup against Tennessee. I think they're 7th in terms of points allowed to the wide receiver position so far this season. We'll go Nico Collins at 42. With Nico, we want pieces of this offense. Implied team total of 26. Noah Brown looks to be a little bit banged up. Nico Collins looks like he is going to be playing. I just want to reiterate, this will be a team that spreads the ball out a ton. And I do think that Tank Dell probably projects out to be the wide receiver one here. But they are very, very close. And they'll probably bounce back and forth rest of season, right? Which is why we have them in the same tier. Terry McLaurin will be our next guy at 43. Hollywood Brown, our next guy at 44. We kind of know who these players are. I mean, there are right now a zillion wide receivers averaging about 12.5, 13 points per game. Like, whenever we go through and make these rankings lists, I understand it looks like, oh my gosh, you have this guy ranked at 38, this guy ranked at 55. How can you like him that much more? They're all averaging about 12.5 points per game, ladies and gentlemen. They're all about in the same bucket. So these next few guys, like, you can start Tyler Lockett if you want. I mean, Lockett, I will say you have to continue to monitor to make sure that he will be good to go. He hasn't practiced early on in the week. But going back to Tyler Lockett, he's a 31-year-old wide receiver. He hasn't been practicing all season, right? You just got to make sure he is showing up on Sunday. DeAndre Hopkins, bad offense, but still, I mean, we've seen the ceiling just a few weeks back. Amari Cooper, very bad offense. I mean, the implied team total is going to plummet with no Deshaun Watson here. And yeah, not a great matchup either from an offensive perspective. But if you are going to play anybody against Pittsburgh, you do want it to be the wide receiver based on what we've seen this season. Ty Chandler will be our next guy at 48. We're operating under the assumption that you are not going to have Alexander Mattison. No Alexander Mattison. Chandler should step into this starting role. Obviously not going to see every single touch, but should see about 70-ish%. Jerome Ford will be our next guy. With Jerome Ford, no Deshaun Watson. Horrendous offense. You don't want to be playing a running back going up against Pittsburgh either. James Cook at 50. We're going to have to continue to monitor this as we get closer to the game. I mean, we were very low on James Cook this past week. I thought that Leonard Fournette was possibly going to play. Leonard Fournette did not play. We'll see if he does this week. I mean, it's kind of funny that Leonard Fournette signs is like tweeting like, oh my gosh, can't believe they let me and Stephon Diggs on the same team. Big fella, you're on the sidelines. Hopefully he does play soon though. Now, Darrell Henderson will be our next running back. Darrell Henderson will be the starter in Los Angeles. Will be a better offense this week, but he is going to be splitting that backfield, right, where you will have Darrell Henderson and Royce Freeman going back-to-back. Courtland Sutton at 52. I understand this looks extremely low on Courtland Sutton. He's averaged 13.5 points per game so far this season, but Courtland Sutton is at the very top of the NFL in touchdown rate. So what you need to ask yourself is, okay, will he continue to have one touchdown on every 7 to 8 targets? Historically speaking, he's probably not going to do that. Historically speaking, probably going to come back down to earth, ladies and gentlemen. Then our next here, we're going to go Deontay Johnson at 53. If you're looking at Deontay Johnson, brutal matchup going up against Cleveland. I know it seems like we are extremely low on him here, but if you go through and look at the underdog pick'em, they have met more than less than 4 receptions this week. If you want to say Mason is clearly going to have more than 4 receptions, you do you. I mean, obviously he has some target volume. Just horrible matchup against the Browns. Godwin, horrible matchup against San Francisco, similar to the other Bucs guys. He'll be much higher in my rest of season rankings. This week it's difficult. Jordan Addison, I know we're going very low on Addison here, but Addison could be the number 3 option in an offense led by Joshua Dobbs. And while I'm rooting for Joshua Dobbs, and while over the past 2 weeks, he's been one of the most exciting, if not the most exciting players in the NFL, we should be realistic here in that it's still probably not going to be a great passing offense. Jacoby Myers will be our next guy at 56. With Myers, the target volume has fallen off an absolute cliff. His underdog pick'em only has him at about 38.5 receiving yards. Obviously, looked like Jimmy Garoppolo preferred Myers here, but he is averaging about 15 points per game. Rashee Rice, great matchup against Philly, who typically allows a ton of points to opposing wide receivers, but you don't necessarily know exactly what the target volume is going to look like. Jalen Warren, Najee Harris, I mean, you could start him and set up a prayer that one of them scores a touchdown, but in reality, they're going up against the Cleveland defense. You have an implied team total of 16.5 points here. Probably want to be avoiding this. And then we have Chuba Hubbard, last but not least, going up against the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, one of the worst offenses in the NFL, going up against one of the worst defenses in the NFL. Not too excited about it. But I think that's all we have for you all in this video. If you enjoyed it, please go down there, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. And if you want to say, Mason, there's no way Tony Pollard scores a touchdown this week, you can go out there and you can take that on Underdog Fantasy, less than half a touchdown. But yeah, if you want to find that link in the description comment section, promo code FLOCK is going to get you a 100% deposit match, plus our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers. And on top of that, ladies and gentlemen, an Amon-Ra St. Brown special pick on more than less than half a total yards. So make sure you take advantage. But thank you again. I really do appreciate you. Really hope you have a great day, and really hope we get to see you out in the live stream later tonight.